Hello, everyone. I am Stephen Medina with Texas Tech, doing my final thesis for Integrative Studies Interdisciplinary Program 4350. Professor's Dr. Tanner. My thesis was on the restoration, post trafficking, utilizing business, and the social work disciplines. I think it's important that we describe the different types of trafficking and a couple of their details. What you basically have are two forms: labor, including indentured servitude, as well as sex trafficking. And the approximate size has been rated at 10.4 billion for the labor annually, and 34 billion for sex trafficking. Well, that's pretty massive economies of scale. Uh, we have to look at the different countries. So that breaks down into three different categories. You have your source countries, which are known for being underdeveloped and a place that traffickers can prey on, with promises of wealth, of jobs, and that sort of thing. And oftentimes they run them through transit countries until finally their destination country where they'll do their labor. United States is a destination country, one of the largest. Okay, um, and because of these details, I I believe that this is a wicked problem. It's going to take multiple agencies, perspectives, disciplines, and it's going to require that we review this many times over in our lifetimes. So what I decided to focus on was a complex problem within a wicked problem, even though we know that it's going to take more effort, more time, more resources to weed this out of our society. Okay, our disciplinary perspectives for business um, are that individuals are separate, autonomous, and a rational entity in their relation to the firm. What this assumes is that there's a mutual agreement in labor. So that's the first fault that we came across researching. Now, what the perspective for social work is that victims have undergone varying degrees of trauma and require a clinical based program to address their complex needs for healing and restoration back into society. So this kind of makes a big assumption that there's funding, and it sets the stage for unlimited funding per se. What what that brought me to was a great research question, and that was, how can the disciplines of business partner with social work to deliver opportunities and restoration to individuals that have been victims of human trafficking? So, with our literature findings within this social work discipline, I pulled from Hodge, did very in-depth research and enjoyed reading it and reviewing. But what they focused on was that they pulled victims into recovery. They focused on contact points, meaning at doctors, emergency rooms, those kinds of things where victims would turn up. They would gain trust, obtain medical care, sustenance, mental health. Really good insight within that reading. With Lumba, what we did was we found that they focused their research on the relationship within the community. They raised awareness, and then they removed the stigmatism to a greater degree in order to bring those victims out of servitude. With Alvarez and Alessi, what we found is they focused on research into the contributions that make victims prime targets. So whether they were in a poverty-stricken country, whether they were illiterate, or their standard of living was so poor that they would become those victims. So they did quite a bit of research with that one. Now, Johnson was actually our largest contributor here, and what they did is they developed the trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy program. With that program, what we can see is that it was scalable, uh, not just within the program, moving it out to different pods and going around the globe, but what you've seen was if the individual was restored or recovered early with trafficking, they didn't move up as far on the scale, and they can move through that program at a faster rate, getting back to society. In addition to their clinical settings and parameters were also able to be manipulated, whether depending on the clinical background and education level of varying countries. In addition to there was language barriers, they can kind of create different names for the same parameters of that program. So it was very scalable, replicable, and customizable. What we found here for the business findings with our research here was McSween had already researched that there was the 3 P's within business, and that's the prevention, protection, and prosecution of traffickers. However, they wanted and did go further and found that partnerships with businesses creates a broader ability to combat human trafficking within the labor supply. Now, Van Buren and the rest of them, their group, they developed the strength of connection to human trafficking. And whether they had weak findings to it or strong, depending on the genre of business. Now, what they did with that one is that led to partnerships with the anti-trafficking, as well as blacklisting subcontractors within their given expertise. With Belser, what we found there was they quantified the economies of trafficking. So they were the ones that provided the numbers, the 10.4 billion as well as the 34 billion. And they were a huge contribution to defining this as a wicked problem. With Rudrowski, that was a great one. They actually developed a journal detailing creative capitalism. Two case stories here were with Nestle. What they did was they found, instead of relying on the local market, which was shady at best because they were trying to break into the Southeast Asian market, what they did is they partnered up with farmers and for their milk, for their cocoa, that kind of thing, and they really got them the resources and made them independent to raise the quality of milk to comply with Nestle, and really strengthen those what would otherwise be it would otherwise be sources for or a point of victimization, as far as they would be the source countries. So strengthening them, helping them out was a big deal for them. Now, one of the other case studies that they had was with Levi's. I was actually sadly disappointed in their move, what they've done. And what has happened is they had $4 billion in revenue back in the early 2000s, and then started moving their plants and their manufacturing out of the United States. They had several here in Texas. They even had a facility there in Loveland, Texas. So they moved out, and they only went up to $5 billion, given the span of about 10 to 15 years. Now, what that really says, and what they had pointed out, was Levi's is a source of trafficking because they utilize subcontractors to make their products, and it's very troubling to learn that with such an iconic brand that really turns profits more so than being within the community and continuing. Now, what really, hate to harp on Levi's, but what really um, is is hurtful with them is the fact that we have such raw materials that we're producing here in Texas. We do a lot of cotton. So to have such a big contributor to the textile industry, it kind of hurts and could use some room for improvement. So moving on, what we had to do was we had to create common ground here, okay? And what I did was I wanted some theories that both work within social work as well as some of the business. One of the great theories that provided some insight was operant theory. Those of you that are psychology majors, you know what I'm talking about. And it kind of explains why people remain in servitude. So, if they're punished to leave or they're going to face retaliation, they're just going to kind of keep doing what they've been doing. The second one I felt was relatable was the ecological theory. And victims are operating within their given environment. And if they're within their given environment, they see corruption, they see things aren't on the up and up, they can't trust, not too much trust levels are there, then they're not going to go outside. And that's kind of what was discussed earlier with trying to pull them in with one of our researchers. So there is some business overlap utilizing the Maslow hierarchy of needs. What we found there was those that are in servitude, they operate at the physiological level, so very, very basic needs, sustenance, that kind of thing. Now, as soon as you have a job for them outside of slavery, you go into a mutual agreement, and then they start operating at the belonging and esteem levels, and hopefully they can get to self-fulfillment. Now, with business concepts, I wanted to inject some of the job enlargement, meaning that you're going to give that individual roles and tasks within that job that really set them apart and make them fulfilled within it. It'll come back around here when I get to my conclusion for the purposes of these. And then job design, you want to make sure that you design your work for that employee in a way that's going to be fulfilling, beneficial, and at their appropriate skill level. Moving on to our conclusion, we posit that we have to have a comprehensive recovery plan. It has to happen. That's clinically based, and the plan of choice here is that trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. Can't say it enough how easy it was for Johnson's development to expand, to replicate. It lends a lot of credibility, and look forward to reading more about the successes of that type of program. Now, what we found is that in our conclusion, we have to have a program that's self-funded with business opportunities, varying roles, keep victims employed for their long-term recovery. We know that this trauma cuts deep and wide, so especially if they've had to witness horrible, horrendous acts, like so many of the researchers had mentioned that they found in their findings. So we know that long-term recovery is going to be an absolute must. Okay, in making this business opportunity viable, we're going to have to require low skill, a high yield profit ability. We're going to have to require robust social work resources and low cost of living in order to make something like this work. And it has to be modular in structure. So if it's modular in structure, we're going to be able to replicate it in other places. We might do things a little differently, maybe invest in different genres of business, or maybe there's some really good colleges to team up with the program, whether they're helped with business corporations, whatever the case is, whatever the changes are, making it modular in structure uh, uh, will create the ability to replicate. So, what our proposal is that Lubbock is the perfect environment for this type of program. Okay, the structure could be a 501c3 with a subsidiary that has a profitable business. Uh, with the research that was conducted, seeing that there's multiple ways. Think of it similar to the Girl Scouts, where they have their whole Girl Scout cookie line that makes them money. Or as other people have explained it, you might be a church, and then all of a sudden you have very, very good success selling secondhand items. Similar to that. There's plenty of tax write-offs to keep the clinical side and housing going. This proposal will require that we partner with Texas Tech and Texas Tech Health Science Center, so we can have a fresh supply of talent that can go in social work, psychology, you name it. If they can help out and lend a hand and provide so many opportunities for research in the future for individuals. Furthermore, Lubbock lends to low crime, low cost, relatively low cost for land, and low cost for housing. So, being 501c3, we would be able to communicate to the community our need for housing for this project. Several builders around town, and we'll be able to develop that through the 501c3, creating the ownership and partnership with the community, whether it's faith-based organizations or grants and of that sort. Now, for this proposal, utilizing the textile industry for income here would be a great advantage in bringing that business discipline in help for the restoration. What we found was there's no local competition here. There is a mill in Lorenzo. They're currently creating cotton thread for cotton filters. So there's no competition. And there's plenty of raw material. There's tons and tons and tons of raw material to get our hands on, and to whether we're going to create denim or jersey for T-shirts or whatever the case is, bed sheets. It can vary so much. There's so much of a range that we can do with it. It will create jobs not just for the victims of being trafficked, but for supporting roles. Trainers, that kind of that sort, and what we're going to see is we're going to be able to use low skill entry and provide an entire industry for these individuals, and have them progress into more skilled labor, creating jobs in marketing, manufacturing, logistics. All of these things are going to be wonderful. Should this proposal be considered by anyone. I was very, very encouraged to come up with this, and very encouraged to see it through, that people can really gain some insight, gain some knowledge, and think outside of the box to help solve a complex problem within the wicked problem. We might not be able to prevent all trafficking, but if we could create a hub where we're restoring individuals and giving their life back and getting them back into society, whether they choose here to stay here or move on to their hometown, it quite honestly, it's up to them. But creating the program for them to exceed would be an amazing feat. And I really enjoyed doing this project, doing this thesis, doing all that research that provided so much clarity and opportunity for us all to be able to succeed. So, thank you. Look forward to your comments, and go Red Raiders.